I don't exactly remember this case, but I do remember why I went to New York. I was between cases, checking out the beautiful fall scenery on the East Coast. One night, I drove past a billboard in upstate New York. Someone, a black silhouette, stood beneath it, walking slowly down the road. I didn't think much of it. A few miles later, however, the same ad was again set up on a different billboard, and under this one too was the black shape of a tall man. This time, he wore a wide-brimmed hat. The billboard was an ad for some tourist attraction in New York City. I slowed down, thinking that it could be a coincidence. Someone was simply moving out from the shadow from underneath the sign, perhaps trying to cross the road. But he was walking toward me, after all. Except he didn't seem to be getting any closer. And as I watched, the lower part of his shadowy face split open. Slowly, very slowly, a row of shiny white teeth appeared. A burgeoning grin. That flash of white startled me, and I glanced away for half a second, and when I looked back, he was gone. Now, I hadn't planned on checking out New York. It was too crowded. But I took it as a sign and headed there anyway. And nothing happened. No ghosts, no stories. I ended up wandering Brooklyn for a few hours, then driving away disappointed. I didn't think much about it afterwards. It's been nearly a year since then. A few weeks ago, I was up late, going through all my old transcripts with the intent of getting rid of some older ones. And at some point, I went outside to have a quick smoke, and when I came back, this document was open on my desktop. See, the thing is, I didn't open it. I didn't even know it existed. I read through it, confused and unnerved. The document was untitled, and it wasn't saved to the folder where I keep the rest of my case transcripts. Combined with the fact that I had no recollection of these events herein, there was no way I would have found this document in the bowels of my laptop. Unless, of course, some shadowy hand waited until I was away from the computer, came in, and pulled it up for me to see. I immediately felt like it was significant. But like I said though, I have no memory of the occurrence it transcribes. Nothing happened in New York as far as I can recall. I can't answer questions regarding it, and there's very little follow-up that I can take. I'll just let it speak for itself. Case number unknown. The dead girl. Location, New York, New York. Date 10/12/17. Witness name. She calls herself Lazary. Let's go with that. Relationship to the case? Subject. We sit in the husk of a building in one of the seedier parts of the city, lit only by candles cupped in clear glass bottles. There is no water here, no electricity, and despite that, she's created a fairly comfortable setup in what has to be a condemned apartment. I have a pile of cushions to sit my bony ass upon and a crate beside me in which to rest my laptop and my half-drunk Coke. There is a cooler next to us filled with beer and soda and wrapped sandwiches from the nearby delicatessen. All in all, this girl, homeless or not, is a better host than half the people I've met on my journey around the US. Lazary, as she calls herself, I look up at her, seated across from me, silent and contemplative, as she gazes out the window towards New York at midnight. She's lit in a weird way, flickering blue glow of the neon gas station sign across the street. It only serves to darken her eye sockets and hollow out her cheekbones. With her hood pulled up and her willowy limbs folded across herself, this girl could easily be a 21st century aspect of death itself. I don't remember how I met Lazary. All I know is what she tells me. And I know this. I was wandering the streets alone tonight, just for a few hours, I happen to glance down an alley, and only to see what I think is a shadowy figure as it disappears around the next corner. Well, where he goes, I follow. I jog after him, and around the corner, and I met with nothing but dumpsters and the neon red and white sign of the 24-hour barber/tattoo parlor at the end of the street. No shadowy guy in sight. Then my arm is grabbed from behind and I turn intense, ready to strike out at a mugger. Instead, I am met with wide gray eyes and a blue painted smirk.
Blake, right?
She said as I nodded, a bit startled.
No idea how you made it, but I'm glad you did. Come on.
Shrugging, I follow. My life's so surreal lately, it's all I can do. She leads me down a few side streets and up a fire escape, and into a dilapidated brick building. She bids me my seat, and I sit. I ask her name. Lazarus. She's young, maybe early 20s, and pretty in a pale, waifish way. She's got blue dreads and blue lipstick and a sad look in her eyes. A look that makes me want to save her. I ask if she knows me. She says that she does. My name, my mission. In fact, she says we've had a number of conversations so far. Emails, phone calls. I came to New York to speak to her. A second ago, I felt sure why I was in this city, but I was led here by Shadow. But now I feel confused, displaced. I don't know if she's lying, but I get the feeling that she's not. So I start recording. So, you wanted me to visit. I assume you have a story to tell?
Yeah. How'd you find me anyway? I told you weeks ago where I wanted to meet, and you promised me you would. Bullshit, I thought, but there you were. That, I'm not sure if you realize, but that's pretty fucking amazing. You, gifted or something, spiritually?
I doubt it. I followed a shadow, and there you were.
Guess it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard. I think you've got a touch of something about you, though. I don't think you're normal. I got a good nose for that kind of thing.
You could say I'm a wandering ghost hunter with no name, no friends, and no real purpose. So yeah, in a way, I guess you're right.
You have a past, though.
Whoa, we're not here to talk about me. I want to hear your story. Why don't I remember anything about you?
Comes with the territory.
And what territory is that?
I'm dead, mister.
I thought it might be something like that. And inwardly I groaned. A crazy homeless girl. Likely about to proposition or rob me. I make a mental note not to follow my shadowy friend's advice anymore. You don't look like a ghost to me.
Yeah, well, I'm not. I'm not a corpse either. I breathe, I eat, I interact with the living. I'm just not one.
So, for all intents and purposes, you're alive.
Well, no. I mean, I interact with the living, but that doesn't mean I can ever affect the living.
What does that mean? You're talking to me. You led me here. I'd say that you're affecting me.
For now, yeah. You'll forget me as soon as you leave.
Really?
Like I said, we've talked before. I always have to act like it's the first time, explain my situation. You always seem cautiously interested. I always give you the same place and time to meet me, but I never thought you'd actually show. No one else ever has. That's why I think you're special.
That's hard to believe.
Of course it is. Just a theory anyway. I don't know how these things work. Maybe you're not special. Maybe it's the date. October 12th. It's my death date.
I mean, congratulations? She sends me a withering look, and I chuckle. I don't know why I like this girl so much, but I do.
Sit and spin, asshole. You want to hear about it or not?
I'm always game for a death story.
Oh yeah, and mine's a good one. It's one of my clearest memories. Shit gets foggy for me, you know? When your impact on everything is so meaningless, you wander around in a sort of daze. But I remember. You may not know it, looking at me now, but I was a cheerleader in high school. Went to a local place like 5 blocks down from here, and I ruled that school. Hottest thing since a trash fire. They still have a picture of me up in the main hall, up like on top of the pyramid. You can go look at it, if you remember to. Everyone said I looked like Madonna, and this was the 80s, mind. She was huge then.
So, you were a teenager in the 80s.
When I say I'm dead, Blakey boy, that means I don't age.
So like a vampire.
I fucking guess.
Long pause.
You think I'm delusional.
I'm withholding judgment. Tell me your story.
How noble. Not like it'll matter what you think of me as soon as you leave. So, okay. This was 1988, middle of my senior year. I was head cheerleader, student body president. I had a literal gaggle of guys tripping over themselves for me. And unfortunately for them, I was my own stereotype. A bitch with a capital B. I legit got my kicks out of hurting people. I took pride in it. You've probably never been rejected by a girl in your life, Blakey, or you would know how I made some of those guys feel.
I've had my fair share of rejections. Believe me.
You're exactly the kind I'd go after, too. Tall and strong, tattoos. I loved me a bad boy. I loved how they turned to putty in my hands. I loved making them cry.
Well, I am flattered. And a little bit scared.
Yeah, you know, I honestly think if things kept going the way they were, I would have turned out to be a total psychopath. Or addicted to coke. Maybe both. So I guess when I got diagnosed with leukemia, it was a blessing in disguise.
Jesus.
God, don't get all sad for me, come on. It was the bad kind of leukemia. Myelogenous. The kind they couldn't cure, like Insidious. I didn't even notice the symptoms until it was too late. Doctors gave me 3 years.
Damn.
Yeah, I was 19. Pretty fucked, honestly. It changed me. You can't help changing after shit like that. I remember I had like 1 month of chemo, and I was like, nope, fuck that noise. I'm not living like that, just to die anyway. I stopped going to the doctors. I was pissed and fucking terrified. I didn't want to die. I couldn't imagine a world without me in it. But medicine wasn't doing shit. So I started investigating alternate means.
Like what?
Well, it started like alternative medicine, hippie shit, you know, herbs and oils and fucking meditation or whatever. Bullshit stuff. None of it made me feel as bad as chemo, though. And kinda, when you're close to the other side, you kinda start to get a little obsessed with it. I did, at least. Started getting into ghosts, spiritualism. I really liked spiritualism. It made death feel romantic. You know, lace and corsets, like I was this tragic walking symbol of the grave. I started to do the goth thing, carried around a Ouija board and pretended it wasn't a fucking Hasbro toy.
Do those things actually work?
Do I fucking look like I know if they work? Man, I'm of the firm opinion that anything works if you believe it does. Particularly with spirits and shit. Maybe not all that fancy techno bullshit you see on ghost shows, but give a dude a letter board and a planchette, leave him alone in a dark room for a couple hours. He's sure as fuck gonna be speaking to some dead people. It's all about the human element, our connection with the other side, or other sides. It's not just death. There's other realms too. And we can access them if we try hard enough, if we just stop for a fucking second and try. That power, that connection, that's what magic is.
Realms.
Yes, Blake, fucking realms, dimensions, the things that inhabit them. Listen, don't get me started. I was talking about dying. So, the goth thing, like, that led to the occult. Started with just, witchy women, seances, tarot readings. Pretty beginner, accessible stuff. Anyone can do it. But if there's one thing I learned, well, you know the origin of the word occult. You know what that means. It means secret, hidden, buried. It means if it's accessible, it's probably not going to be powerful. It's not going to shift your life in one fell swoop or let you meet a god. See, the shit that gives us the real goods, that's a little harder to find. You can't just walk into Borders, pick up Raven fucking Moonchild's latest book on Wicca and expect it to give you all the answers. This is the esoteric shit I'm talking about here, the upheaving, ancient kind of shit. The kind of shit that give the Golden Dawn conniptions, where you're actually reaching into other realms and pulling things out of them in a very real and visceral way. This shit, even if it was widely circulated, most people wouldn't want to make the necessary sacrifices to do it. Angels, or the things we call angels, they're not answering to your cute little chalk circles. No demon is dragging her ass from the bowels of hell for a dead cat or a bloodletting. These rituals take months, years. They chew you up and spit you out. And half the time they don't even work anyway. I knew a guy, well, it's kind of off topic, but I knew a guy who locked himself in a cabin for 9 months, did this intensive ritual 12 hours a day, every day. And I mean, this stuff was physically, mentally, emotionally exhausting. It had him drawing complex sigils, balancing on one foot for hours, and I think he had to choke himself until he passed out 3 times a week, all while focusing intent and speaking Latin. Plus there was this whole masturbation schedule that just, like I said, intensive. Anyway, our boy does this for 9 months, 12 hours a day, no rest. Had to pay attention to the moon phases and hours and the curvatures of the earth. And then he was just supposed to be greeted by, I don't even remember, some being that could give him what he wanted. So at the end, our boy washes his hands and heads into the library to meet what he summoned. And nothing's there. He closes the library door, opens it again. Nothing. Empty room. He waits. Nothing shows up. He waits longer, but he said that he knew after a couple minutes that it hadn't worked. He just sat down and cried. All the time, energy, blood, sweat, and tears, wasted. Now, we don't know where the problem was. Maybe he fucked up the sigil. Maybe he skipped a word. Hell, maybe once he didn't come at the precise moment he was supposed to. But we asked him, and he said he carried it out perfectly. He says it couldn't be that. It had to be his intention. He thought the being that he was summoning did, in fact, hear his cry, but it decided to ignore him because of what he was asking for. See, a year before this, our boy got catfished on the internet by some dick who used to push him around in high school. The bully saw his dating profile, recognized him from the old days. God knows that guy had some confusion to work through. He pretended to be a hot chick who was totally into, this schlubby kid magician who worshipped the sweat between Aleister Crowley's flabby ass cheeks. Why he ever thought some hot goth model would want him, I can't imagine, but he did. And he gave this fake girl everything. Info, secrets, money. And when he found out it was all a lie, he kinda snapped. And he went and did a complicated 9-month ritual, not to increase his sexual prowess or find a woman who was right for him, but to get revenge. 9 months dwelling on this. And it didn't even work.
We pause to share a laugh, and I catch her eye. She glances away, grinning mischievously. The smile looks good on her.
Anyway, it gives you a good idea of the kind of shit I'm talking about here. Breaking through, opening doors into other worlds. That's hard stuff. But even once you do, now you're dealing with things way beyond you. things with their own agendas. And they might not like you very much.
Is that what happened to you?
Me? Nah. Extra-dimensional beings love me. Your shadow friends, for example, they wanted us to meet.
Friends? Like plural?
Duh.
I thought that there was only the one.
Those things travel in packs.
Long pause.
You know, they're kind of like a phenomena, right? Shadow people. Folks see them all the time.
Yeah, I knew that.
But you seem to have your own little following. They're interested in you.
Seems like it. I don't understand why, though.
You psychic?
I shake my head.
Maybe in your childhood. You ever see shit? Things you thought were hallucinations?
Nope. Before a couple of years ago, I never had any experiences.
Weird. Usually gifted people sense something at different points in their lives, but you're saying before whatever happened to you, you were effectively a rubber plug on the end of a spiritual wire. Dead stop.
That's the gist. She's looking at me now, frank and frustrated. I avert my eyes.
That's really something.
It's not that interesting.
No, actually it is. Actually, I don't think you realize how interesting you are, Blake. You know, things like your shadow friends, they're usually not going to focus on any given person. Same as you'd ignore a fly on your windowsill. So the fact that you're not even spiritually gifted to begin with, and they're still following you, that's about the most interesting thing I've heard in a decade.
Well, lucky fucking me, I guess.
Probably the opposite. My guess is you had some really terrible shit happen to you. Shit that involves other realms. Way more than a fucking haunting. Shit most people can't even imagine. Am I right?
We're not talking about me.
I knew it. And when it was over and you came out the other side, instead of running for cover or holing up and trying to find a bit of fucking normalcy, which, by the way, is the usual human response, you decide to leave everything behind. You decide to wander across the fucking country, chasing exactly the kinds of things that fucked you up in the first place.
Long pause.
So, of course, these shadowy fucks are swarming you. Of course you're experiencing the shit you are. You fucking earned it, Blake. All of your pain and anger is just icing on the cake.
If you're saying I wanted any of it...
No. God, no. Of course I'm not. But you took the bull by the goddamn horns, didn't you? You're earning every scrap of knowledge that comes your way.
I'm not in it for, I don't know, power or whatever.
I know. I think that's part of it. You're genuine. Kinda pure in a way. I think that attracts things like your shadow people. Entities from different realms.
I jump at the word entity. I've kept it far from my thoughts for years. She notices. She tilts her head, bemused. Her eyes probing as if she wants to open me up and read my secrets. But she can't. I shake my head and grunt.
You know not to trust them, right? They probably don't have your best interests at heart.
I hadn't honestly given it much thought.
Bullshit. Anyway, now you have your advice. Be wary of them.
Can we drop the subject?
Sure. What you want to talk about?
Jesus Christ.
Okay. Keep your panties on. Where were we? Oh yeah, my death. I got in with a group of, we'll call them magicians. They have all kinds of names they like to use. People like our boy I was talking about. I was a total neophyte, but I was eager to learn. They liked that. They felt sorry for me. Plus, I was fucking their leader, so I'll spare you the details. But that group opened a lot of doors. Someone met someone, who knew someone who'd heard of this guy up in the Dolomites. Supposedly, he was able to cure what ails ya. At this point, I was really sick, tired, my joints ached, I was stick thin. But despite all that, we got up enough money and I boarded a plane to Italy and hiked up into the mountains with nothing but a backpack.
She sighs. She looks sad.
I never saw my friends again. The magician, my best hope, his name was Massimo. He lived in a mansion in the mountains, as far from civilization as you can reasonably get, at least reasonable for someone as used to luxury as Massimo. We'd written letters, but I wasn't ready for how young he was. Couldn't have been out of his 30s, which, for someone with his kind of reputation, that was kind of crazy. I don't know, though. He told me he met Al Capone once, so maybe he was older than he looked. I think I knew as soon as I saw him, this was a mistake. The smile he gave me when he first opened the door.
She shudders and shakes her head.
Almost 30 years. I still remember that smile. Like I was a piece of meat he was going to salt and throw in the oven. No one had ever made me feel like that before. He was outwardly friendly, funny. I decided a couple hours in, my first impression was wrong. I mean, there I was. First trip abroad, in this beautiful Italian mansion, with a guy that literally embodied tall, dark, and handsome. And he was charming me, giving me wine. As the night went on, I got the impression that, that he expected me to sleep with him. Like that was already decided. So I did. It felt... I think that he was doing some kind of magic during... We were bonded. I can't really explain. I felt it. He said that it had to be that way. I had to give myself to him, totally, for all of this to work. So I did. I was so hopeful. But to him, I think I was just an experiment, to see if he could do it.
She shudders and shakes her head.
He never flat out lied to me, I'll give him that. He'd say, you want to stay on this earth? Yes, obviously. You want to be free of sickness? You want no pain? Yes, yes. And he'd say, forever? And I'd shrug and take it as hyperbole, yes, forever. And we shook hands, and he took a drop of my blood, and that was it. But he had a book. He never let me near it. I don't know what it was. I'm glad I don't. And just the thought of opening that thing. He was so far gone before I even met him. So the ritual. Yeah, I spent more than 6 months up in the mansion. We did magic every day. Most of it was prep. There was the sigil making and sex and bloodletting and screaming and meditation. I cried a lot. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I was in it, goddammit. And finally, on October 12th, Massimo came to me. I was so sick by then I could barely get out of bed. He said my pain would end soon, but he also said that I'd have to die first.
Yeah, no.
Right? I was such a moron. I trusted him. As we walked to the ritual chamber, he explained, death is the end of a cycle, winter into spring. You must go through it to start again, and you must go through it 9 times, and 9 times 9, and 90 times 9, until even death cannot touch you. In my head, I was like, this sounds like some woohoo bullshit cliche. Figured he was talking about, metaphorical death. So we enter the space. Sigils burned into the floor. I strip naked. He's chanting. I don't know what language. He has a beautiful ritual dagger. And he runs the blade up and down my body.
She closes her eyes. She looks like she's torn between pain and ecstasy.
And he pauses with its tip against my chest.
She presses a shaky finger between her breasts, as if by doing so she can conjure the feeling more wholly.
As flesh, he says. As earth. And he stabs me in the heart.
I let out a shaky breath as she does.
I remember the pain, like nothing I'd ever felt before. I fell. Massimo fell with me. And he stabbed me again, between the ribs, again in my side. I remember it scraping against my hip bone. Again in my neck. That was when I passed out, but he kept going. I know because I still have his souvenirs.
Lazarus rises to her feet and lifts the hem of her t-shirt that she's wearing, tugs it up over her head, and tosses it to the ground. I start to protest, but I fall silent when I see the scars. Dark, raised lines against her pale skin, each about 2 inches long, the width of a large knife. Some are knotted, as if healing has come hard. Others is almost as perfect in symmetry. And there are dozens. Jesus. She sits back down, wearing only her black bra, not bothering with the t-shirt. I decide not to press the issue. Her nakedness isn't important. As she turns slightly to grab her cigarette off the windowsill, I see more scars up and down her back, between the jutting bones of her spinal column, and peeking up from her pant line. I look away.
Cute, right?
She's watching me intently. I meet her eyes, trying to smile.
It caught me off guard, too. Massimo hadn't mentioned, or, not in so many words, that as flesh, as earth thing. I don't think that was part of the spell. I think he was just trying to let me know what was up.
Fucking Massimo.
Right? So, that was my first death.
Wait, first?
Uh-huh. 9 times 9, remember? And 90 times 9. I don't remember being dead. When I woke up, we were in another room. Massimo was stalking around, muttering. He had blood, everywhere. His face, his hands, his clothes. It was still wet. God, it hurt. Massimo turned and saw me, finally. He said I was dead for 7 minutes. Shouldn't have been no more than 5. Said it like it was my fault. I think I was in shock. Maybe that's when I saw who he really was, the first death broke his hold on me. Washed clean. I saw that he was a monster. But I also, I came back from that, I was awake. I was alive. I felt stronger somehow. So I asked him what was next.
You continued? After all of that?
Blake, I wasn't the way I am now. I was thirsty for this. Some of the stab wounds had already healed. I thought he knew what he was doing. Next, I think it was, the hanging. That one sucked. You get harder to kill every time, He used rope, made a noose, tossed it over a ceiling beam. I climbed on a stool. I chickened out at the last moment, no shit, I don't wanna. He kicked the stool out from under me. As breath, he said. As air. I hung for a solid 10 minutes. Stopped struggling after 5. My neck had snapped, but it hadn't killed me. He did a lot of chanting and pacing, burning herbs. I remember shit after I died too. But only a little. Gray, flat plains. I was walking. I was alone. I snapped too in a third room. I was told I'd been gone for 2 hours, which was perfect. His faith in me was restored. There was a tub of water, like a bathtub. Massimo had me climb in. This time it was as humorous as water. Then he started singing. Guy had a good voice for a monster. But the song was discordant, ugly, beautiful. I still hear it sometimes, in my head. Drowning was peaceful. It was my favorite, I think. When he pushed my head underwater, his song distorted. I thought I heard more voices, some ethereal choir. I saw light in the room behind him. I felt happy, at peace, like this was right. He kept me under until the bubble stopped. What I saw of death that time, or maybe it wasn't a realm of the dead, but I was wandering dark hallways. A labyrinth. Looked like an old mansion, kind of a Baroque look, elaborate. The furniture was old, disused. All the windows were covered. really heavy brocade curtains. There were tons of doors too, but all of them were locked. Mounds of gray dirt were pushed up against them, like buttressing them from the inside. The windows too. Lots of the curtains had big piles of dirt in front of them. I passed a fireplace at one point. It was filled with dry earth, packed up to the chimney. The place felt insulated, encased, inescapable, like it had sunk into the ground. I knew there was a door for me somewhere, though. Somewhere in all the infinite empty hallways, a door was waiting to be opened. I just had to find it. That's when I woke up. I was outside. I remember the stars. Massimo had me on a stone slab in the center of his courtyard. I was cold and wet. My eyes stung. There was some kind of weird smell, chemical smell. Massimo looked tired. He was ready for this to be over, but we were barely halfway through. His voice was cracking and his hair was all crazy. He looked like he could barely lift his arms. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he was so tired he made a mistake. I think about that a lot. Maybe I was just meant to live, have my cancer cured. Maybe he didn't mean for me to be the way I am. He looked down at me. Something in his eyes really scared me, unhinged. And his voice was totally shot, hoarse. As spirit, he said, as fire. In a split second before he lit that match, I realized I wasn't soaked in water.
She pauses here, clearly reliving something very painful. I watch her hug herself and bury her face into her knees.
I burned for a long time, a really long time. Longer than someone should be able to. It was the worst death, bar none. I don't know how long I was dead that time, but there was this endless black. And far away, all around me, a sphere of light. Colors like an aura. Colors I'd never seen. And I was a part of them. Or I needed to be. I was struggling to get to them. But I was being dragged away. Back to where I came from. Back to the fire. I only looked back once, but I saw it in its fullness, like a vast eye in the darkness. It watched me go. It could have stopped me, but it watched me go.
It was at this point that she started to cry, and I let her. I moved next to her and I hold her for a long time, until she was ready to start again.
Yeah, fuck you and your big, strong arms.
Sorry.
No, don't be. You'd think after 30 fucking years. Anyway, so when I woke up...
We can stop.
No, we can't. You might be my best chance at a permanent record. So listen the fuck up and keep recording.
Aye, aye, Captain.
Okay, so I woke up. I was still on the stone slab outside, but it was morning. That was it. Ritual over.
Wait, what was with the 9 times 90 and all that?
Well, I guess there was some room for hyperbole after all. I wanted to ask Massimo that very question, though. But he wasn't there.
He just left you?
Well, I showered, got dressed. My body wasn't burned up. No idea why. The stab wounds stuck around, but they were already scars by then. None of the other deaths left marks. And I honestly felt great. Amazing. Better than I ever had. I was actually happy despite what I'd just been through. So I wandered the house for a while, called for Massimo. I wanted to thank him. And I finally found him, in his bed, sleeping, all washed and cozy. Pissed me off. He left me out in the garden like a fucking rake, so I woke him up. He springs out of bed, all panicked, like, "Who the fuck are you? What are you doing in my house?" And I'm like, "Really, dude? We've lived together for 6 months." And he's like, "Get out, get out." He won't believe me, says that he has no idea who I am. So obviously I'm baffled, hurt, He's threatening the cops. I'm like, okay. And I go and I get my things and I leave.
Just like that?
Well, no. I tried to pop into the library, say bye just in case, and picture the whole scene over again. Him, like, jumping up, who the fuck are you, blah, blah, blah. Like, not only had the last 6 months never happened, our last interaction hadn't happened either. So, I left. I was so scared. I just knew something was very wrong. So, the rules. I'm here, a living body. I'm healthy. As far as I've seen, I'm immune to disease. I'm also immune to death. And trust me, I've tried. I've lost track of the suicide attempts. I have no more memories of the death realms, though. I don't think I can go back there anymore. So, those, I guess, are the good things about it. I'm permanent. I'm here on this earth until, well, I don't really like to think about that, until I find out how not to be. But I also can't have any effect on the world. I slide in and out of people's minds like water through a sieve. Living people usually ignore me, but if I do manage to get their attention, they forget me as soon as they focus on something else. Sometimes I can get people to talk to me for a while, like we're talking now, hours. But as soon as they leave the room, poof, all memory of it, erased. Emails I send tend to get lost or skipped over. Texts are the same. I can call people, but they forget as soon as we hang up. And once my friends and family gave me up for dead, it was like just causing undue distress to even try. Getting back to the US was so hard. I didn't really know the rules then. Navigating Italy, cab drivers kept forgetting I was in the car. No one spoke to me. No one even looked at me. I had to yell to get attention from servers, and then I was just the crazy chick who appears out of nowhere and screams at people. I kept telling myself it was all a nightmare, just a horrible nightmare. Or maybe I was in hell. Perfect hell for me, right? So desperate for interaction and approval, ignored for eternity, forgotten. But once I was home, it was worse. I went to my parents. Big mistake. I think I lived with them for weeks before it got to be too much. I hated how they jumped every time I came in a room, or sometimes they wouldn't even notice. If I moved shit around, they were always confused and scared. And whenever they saw me there, we had to have the same conversation. Yes, I was back from Italy. No, I hadn't disappeared. No, I wasn't dead. I watched my mom get sadder and sadder every day she thought I was still missing. I watched my dad start drinking. I watched them mount a search operation in another country for a daughter who was right there at home. So I left. I couldn't do it anymore. They had a memorial service for me a few months later. I didn't go. I moved around a lot at first. It's easy to find places to stay when you're a living ghost, but none of them are permanent. You can't pay rent when the landlord doesn't even know he has a tenant. You can't get a job when your employer doesn't remember your interview. I squatted in nice places a lot, but I hated getting walked in on by realtors or prospective buyers. This place, I've been here a year now. It ain't the Ritz, but at least I don't get bothered.
So, what's your life like, day to day?
Dreamlike, I guess. Transitory, lonely. Probably it's a lot like how real ghosts feel. You're the first person I've actually talked to in more than a year. It's like when you affect the world so little, it stops affecting you. I don't really get hungry anymore. I don't really sleep. Every day feels like a dream, except I know I'm in it.
How do you, buy things? These sandwiches?
It's really easy for me to steal things, Blake.
Obviously. Sorry.
Yeah, so that's my story.
It's really incredible.
You still don't believe me?
No,
Nah, it's okay. I can tell. I wouldn't believe me either.
No, I believe you, or at least I'm trying to.
Thanks. That actually means a lot. You'll forget me, though, as soon as you leave.
No, I won't. I have this recording.
You'll forget you ever made it. You won't even think to listen.
No, here, listen. We'll listen back to it right now.
Oh, God.
No, you're great. I'll transcribe it right now while I'm here with you, and I'll save it to my computer, and then I'll have a permanent record. I won't be able to forget.
Something will happen to it. It'll get lost or corrupted.
It's worth a shot, Lazary. I don't... I can't forget you. I can't.
It won't. Okay. We can try.
And so we do. It's been nearly a year since that night. Do I remember Lazary? No. Does that mean anything? Not necessarily. The story's pretty wild. It pushes even my willingness to believe. But, Jesus, if it never happened, where did this transcript come from? I need more proof. I had a date. I started scanning through my digital records, praying to God I saved it. There are dozens of files. 12/10/2017 was not among them, and I cursed. I checked the files on either side, and nope. I used the search function on my computer. Nothing. Finally, in a last-ditch effort, I went into my recycle bin, which hadn't been emptied since the dawn of time. I scrolled for what felt like years, reading every single file name, even chains of numbers that I thought could be it, and finally, near the bottom, somehow surrounded by files much older than it, I found her name. Lazary. I was practically shaking as I restored it to my desktop. I opened it, and my voice came through the speakers, crystal clear. So, you wanted me to visit? I assume you have a story to tell? I waited for Lazary's response, glancing at the transcript. 10 seconds went by. She should have been talking, but there was only silence. I doubt it. I followed a shadow, and there you were. Frowning, I raised the volume, and just silence. White noise. Then my eardrums were blasted when I started speaking again. You could say I'm a wandering ghost hunter with no name, no friends, and no real purpose. So yeah, in a way, I guess you're right. Cursing, I listened further. I waited for a long period of silence, glancing at the transcript. I slowly raised the volume until the static of the peripheral noise was all but deafening. I heard myself cough and shuffle occasionally, maybe chuckle at what she was saying. And of course I asked questions. I carried on my side of this recorded conversation, exactly true to the transcript. There were long pauses where Lazary's voice should have been, but it was just white noise. There was no Lazary there. Except, every so often, as the recording progressed, I thought I heard a voice beneath the static, far away, soft and feminine. So faint it could be imagined, but I think that it's not. I like to think, in fact, that a year ago I sat down and spoke to a beautiful girl, a girl who was very alive and very real, a girl who was flesh and bone, warm and breathing, a living girl whose recorded voice left only an EVP. She affected me profoundly, and I had completely forgotten her. But as I listened to the static in the recording, listened to it over and over, her soft words become a bit clearer. Her voice begins to strengthen, if only a little. I think I'm starting to remember.